All right, so welcome to the Cultural Pulse podcast. This is actually episode number 3. So we've got the Fijian and Pacific representation right up there.
Whoop, whoop.
And the one before that was
Thank you for having us.
It's great to have you on here, and it's happened quite organically, hasn't it?
It certainly has.
I think you manifested it, Seville. So today we're gonna go in. We're gonna talk. I'd love to hear about what you're doing. We know that you're both very community minded. You've been here for a long time, so you ride multiple worlds, multiple cultures, multiple dimensions. We may talk about this topic of intersectionality, which is interesting. You can teach us about that. Want to learn more about your schools programs, music, the connection with music and culture, identity, this notion of multi-dimensional notion of identity, and how that sits here for second generation as well. Fijian Aussies, Pacific Aussies, what does that mean? And exploring that a little bit more. And then a little bit just about organizations and how organizations are engaging with the Pacific at the moment and how that's changed over time.
Thelma Thomas is the name, and MC Trey is my hip hop artist name, and I've been doing music for close to 20 years and working with young people here on Gadigal land, and important that we pay respects to the First Nations and custodians of this land that we're gathering upon here today. I'm very blessed to be able to be here, born in Fiji, spent 13 years over there, and then migrated here as a young person. Very blessed to have all these opportunities to continue to share our stories in this space. Can you intro yourself as well?
Obviously, she's an MC. She does it so well, so tight, so smooth, right? She just goes right into it. So Sevu Wanga from Fiji as well, and spent most of my life in Australia. I was raised in Fiji as well in the earlier parts, and that was wonderful. So as far as my work, I wear too many hats to talk about. So I'll just... I suppose a lot of the work has been here in Australia as well as in Fiji, as far as the Fiji and Pacific community, especially in terms of community development, a lot around social justice as well. So it kind of incorporates a lot into that, and just being able to have the opportunity and the capacity to learn and also to participate, to share, and to help others in the process, So it's quite wide as far as which way that would go.
So why have both of you chosen to work with the community after being here?
For me, I think when I migrated, I really missed not being able to be a Pacific youth, because I left when I was 13, so learned a lot about Fijian culture, Pacific culture, but then when I got here, I was like, where am I? I don't see myself on TV or in the newspapers, and, where can I go and create? Where can I go and connect with young people like myself? So I started going to events and then eventually learning to create my own events as well, to create these spaces. And this is where I've learned more about what it is to be Fijian, Samoan, Aussie, growing up in Sydney. And that drew, for me, there was something missing. So I was like, okay, I need to be able to recreate this for others. Yeah. And that's where we met, in that space, many years ago.
Many years ago. For me, it's... my family has always been very involved way back in Fiji. So my dad was one of the elders and really as a pioneer, not only in Fiji, but also here in terms of his work we were raised in a village, and I've lived in multiple villages as well. So besides my village, which is called Dotata in Bau, Chikinombo in Tailevu. For Fijians, they'll know where that is, or else you'll look it up. But so we were basically born into, the whole family was born into seeing, our family partake in fundraising, building a church, doing movies, cinemas in the church hall to raise funds and all kinds of festivals and so forth. So it was very part of our upbringing. So when we came over to Australia, it was the same thing, you know. Dad is one of the founders of the Fiji Uniting Church here in Canterbury, and amongst a couple of other elders there at the time. And so that was the first established Fijian church. He did the same in the village, right? Building our village church. And all sorts of things like bus companies, you know. We were the first Fijian-owned bus company to transport our own people and as well for, you know, for everyone else. Those sort of things. So it was always creating things. Started the co-op here to bring food and fresh food and so forth from Fiji as well, back in the 80s, you know. So those sort of things has always been part of my life. So it's nothing new for me to be to organically go to being part of community and seeing what I can do to help others and so forth. So,
Do you think both of you did that because you're essentially first generation? Are you seeing the younger kids, the kids that are born here, doing the same, or what are you observing?
I think it's a bit more challenging for the young people that have been raised here because they're still trying to navigate, you know, this space. And I think just listening to your story, it reminds me of, you know, the influence that we have in our homes, right? You know, our fathers
Yes.
they were building infrastructures for our community, whether it was Fiji or here, you know.
Good point, yeah.
I think it highlights the importance of having that right mentorship, you know, or the leadership around the young people in order for them to see that it's the norm for us to
That's
be.
right.
If there isn't an avenue or a pathway, we can create it. Let's create it. Let's not wait for things to be given to us. So,
yes.
you know, I didn't realize your dad did so much of that. I knew about the church influence, but, you know, my dad did similar things in Fiji, but with sports, you know, training boys in boxing, playing football, taking guys to the Commonwealth Games. You know, we grew up with sports people living in our homes when they'd come over to play sports. So I'd watch my dad build that infrastructure. And only reflecting on it now, I'm like, that's how it influenced me to do what I do, you know, creating these spaces. And I guess young people here are trying to, but there's still a lot more support that needs to go into, you know, showing them the pathways that exist and providing that mentorship.
Yeah. I think that there's still, at the same time, it's a generational, you know, part of a generational journey. With the younger ones, they're still trying to find their path, trying to identify themselves within the context of, you know, being in Australia and so forth. And also, we were here at a time where those services were not available widely for us as well, you know, in terms of
Support
settlement,
services
yes,
and-
support services and settlement. Now, even when you're talking about events and things, you know, that has changed. The landscape has changed dramatically, where the peak of our events, there was, you know, 20, 30,000 people. Whilst now it's, because of the landscape changing, people are identifying themselves differently, and there are a lot of these things available that they have tapped into, that there's no, you know, the need for that is perhaps not as large, and it's a generational thing. You find that the older ones, but then, having said that, because the young people are going through this own journey of trying to find out who they are, and perhaps they've been in, you know, their parents may have been ones that have decided to go mainstream with the way that they, you know, to integrate that way. And so a lot of the young people are coming to us saying, we want to find out where we're from. We want to learn our culture. We want to learn the language. My parents never taught me this. You know, they never taught me about the culture, the language. So they themselves are trying to find their identity with that. While their parents were comfortable enough with who they were to then venture elsewhere. Now the younger people are sort of looking back to that.
The teenagers,
Yeah.
yeah, very hungry to connect with, you know, and a lot of them talking about going back to the islands
Yes.
to spend time, to learn the culture and to be immersed in the village setting. And it's almost like this romantic notion that we have when we live here, right? That you'll go back to this perfect village setting. unfortunately, it's not like that.
It is for 2 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And then it's time to come back. But, you know, it's exciting to see that hunger amongst our young people to learn more, you know.